Saturday, April 20th, 2024, and this is Sedona Life with Stephen Hanks, Red Rock Country's radio magazine, heard every Saturday at this time on Mellow Mountain Radio, KAZM 106.5 FM and 780 AM. I'm your host, Stephen Hanks, and I welcome you to a radio show that attempts to explore all the fascinating aspects of life and engages with intriguing personalities in Sedona and the Verde Valley area. Today's show and all of my shows until the end of May are being sponsored by an outstanding local real estate company. Damien and Danielle's Sedona Village Real Estate Group with Coldwell Banker Realty should be your go-to real estate agents in the Sedona area. Why, you may ask? Because their experience in the Sedona and the Verde Valley area and their dedication to this community matter. My producer behind the glass is the amazing Ryan Thompson. How was your week, Ryan?
Busy, very busy.
Yeah.
I just
always
got done.
Busy, Ryan.
I know. I just came back from the ultra marathon. I played some music over there this morning.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
How early did that start?
6 a.m.
6 a.m. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess like the New York Marathon that I used
Yeah.
to hang out. My wife, the Woman Warrior, ran that a couple of times.
Did she really?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
awesome.
And my daughter. My daughter's a big runner.
Oh, that's cool.
She's a dietitian nutritionist, so she's got to.
Oh, yeah.
Whenever we go to restaurants, it's like, Dad, put down the salt. That's what I hear constantly. But anyway, Ryan, I was going to mention something about the significance of today being 420.
Right on, man.
But our show theme today is public education in Sedona. And I have two of our educators in the studio, and I don't want to take the chance of being expelled from school talking about that, which can definitely happen. Although in Sedona, I don't know. But before I introduce those special guests, it's time for our usual top of the show segment, Stephen's Sedona Scene, when I tell you all about a few of the exciting events I'd like to recommend over the next week in Sedona and the Verde Valley. So tomorrow, beginning at 12 p.m., the Sedona United Methodist Church, and this is wild, invites all motorcycle enthusiasts, visitors, and local community to join them for the 12:30 p.m. Blessing of the Bikes prior to their usual Sunday worship service. Light refreshments will be served, and everyone who attends will receive an appreciation gift. And all are welcome to stay for the church's outdoor worship service, which starts at 1 p.m. The Sedona United Methodist Church is on 110 Indian Cliffs Road, and their website for more information is sedonaumc.org. Is it just me, or do I feel like only in Sedona could you have a church blessing motorcycles? I don't know. By the way, I hear that the rabbi at the Jewish community of Sedona and the Verde Valley is going to create a miracle on Monday night, the first night of Passover, by eliminating all the cars on Route 179 near Tlaquepaque. I mean, I think the parting of the road, right? On Thursday, April 25th at 6 p.m., the Red Rocks Music Festival will present From Bach to Broadway and A Violin of Hope. Violinist Moshe Bergspan, who is the founder and director of the Red Rocks Music Festival, will perform works by Johann Sebastian Bach and a number of Broadway classics, including Fiddler on the Roof. And I will resist the temptation to start singing If I Were a Rich Man. A few selections will be performed on A Violin of Hope that belong to Holocaust survivor Max Diamant. The concert will take place at the Sedona Conscious Living Center, 120 Deer Trail Drive. Appetizers will be served at 6 p.m., with the concert starting at 6:30. Tickets are $25 online and $30 at the door, and they can be purchased at redrocksmusicfestival.com. Please bring your receipt for admission. From April 26th to 28th, at the Verde Valley School's Brady Hall in the village of Oak Creek, which is on 3511 Verde Valley School Road, you can experience the 9th annual Piano on the Rocks International Festival, led by Festival Artistic Director and featured pianist Sandrine Ertely-Seo. The theme of this year's festival is an homage to Gabriel Fauré, an extremely influential French classical composer during the latter part of the 19th century. During the 3 days of free shows, all starting at 4 p.m., Residents of Sedona and the Verde Valley area will experience examples of Fauré's music, as well as of composers such as Schubert, Ravel, Haydn, Rachmaninoff, and more, all played by excellent pianists. For more information, go to pianoontheRocks.org. And finally, also from April 26th to 28th, is the 21st annual Sedona Spring Open Studios Artists at Work Tour. This year, the much anticipated event has grown to include artist studios in Sedona, Cornville, Cottonwood, Clarkdale, and Camp Verde. I just noticed there's a lot of alliteration in these town names, right? The tour is sponsored by the Sedona Visual Artists Coalition, is free to everyone, and runs from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. all 3 days. Brochures with a map, a complete list of participating artists, and other details on scheduling, locations, and more are available at businesses, hotels, and restaurants throughout the Verde Valley, as well as at the Sedona Arts Center and the Sedona Chamber of Commerce Visitor Center in Uptown. Information can also be found online at sedonaartistcoalition.org. So before I introduce my two special guests in the studio, I just want to tell the audience a little bit about Sedona Red Rock High School, which was opened in September 1994 and graduated its first senior class in the 1996-97 school year. The junior high school joined this campus in 2016, and the addition of sixth grade came in 2021. For the current fiscal year of 2023, the projected enrollment was approximately 500 or more students. The school has a very active and effective booster club that provides a lot of financial and promotional support. And being the baseball coach at the high school the last couple of years, I'm well aware and thankful of the help that the booster club has given our team and a lot of the other teams at Red Rock High School. And of course, there's the beautiful Sedona Performing Arts Center that hosts many musical productions and events throughout the year. And now I'll tell you a little bit about my two guests who were gracious enough to join me in the studio today. Tom Swaninger became the superintendent of the Sedona Oak Creek Unified School District for the start of the 2023-24 school year after having served as principal at the Oak Creek Unified School District for 4 years. And if I get any of this wrong, correct me at some point.
Queen Creek.
Did I say, what did I say? Quick?
Oak Creek. That's
Oh, I said Oak Creek.
Yeah,
See,
yeah.
I'm glad I asked you to correct me.
Yeah, there you go.
Tom received his bachelor's degree in elementary education from Arizona State University, his master's degree in counseling from Oakland University, and his doctorate in education leadership from Northern Arizona University. Tom's entire professional life has been devoted to education, and for the first 15 years of his career, he served as a classroom teacher and counselor before transitioning to an administrative role for the past 7 years, and pretty impressive administrative roles, I would say. Heather Isom became the principal of Sedona Red Rock High School last May, replacing the retiring Dennis Dearden, who was also serving as superintendent of the school district. Heather became assistant principal last year and has been with Sedona Oak Creek Unified School District since 2017, during which she taught junior and senior level social studies, United States history, government, and economics, all subjects very close to my heart. Sorry, I didn't have you as a teacher at some point. Heather received her bachelor's degree in political science and economics from Southern Utah University in 2004. So very impressive couple of people who are running our schools. And I welcome both of you to Sedona Life with Steve and Hanks. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
So this school year was the first year in the jobs for both of you. And my first question has to be, and you can take turns answering this, what challenges have you had to face, and how do you feel about how the year has gone on any level? Tom,
Want me
you
to
can
begin?
start.
Yes, please.
Well, before actually, if I could pivot a little bit before I get to the challenges, I was just by listening to your intro and all the things that are going on.
Please don't say I made a mistake.
No, not that I'm aware of. So I have always lived in larger metropolitan areas, larger schools, and my family and I have always have for a long time uh, contemplated and moved to a smaller town.
Hmm.
And one of the things that has held us back is we really appreciate culture and the arts and opportunities for robust offerings of activities and cultural endeavors. And when I was listening to all the things that are going on in Sedona, I was struck by how this is really a perfect scenario for our family. We have that small town feel. We love the outdoors, but yet there's a lot of cultural offerings that are
And
here.
I could
So,
have done like four more
oh, I'm sure.
just for this week.
I am sure.
Yeah.
So it's a perfect landing spot.
Yeah.
At least that's what I feel. As far as my first this is my first year as a superintendent as well, um, and the first part of the year, the school year, for my at least from my perspective, I was just really focused on observing, listening. I still am,
Right.
but just really getting a feel for the area, the community, the strengths of our schools, the strengths of the individuals who are running our schools, but also kind of those gaps in areas that we can improve. I don't, it doesn't matter how successful you are. There's always room for improvement.
Right.
Um, we have, you know, and this is not a problem that is 100% unique to Sedona, but I would say that it's pretty prevalent, and I'm not going to say anything that we're not already. Any of the listeners out there are probably already quite aware of this. Is the cost of living is very
Right.
high.
Yeah.
Housing is difficult to find, and educators' salaries aren't exactly conducive to this area. And finding quality teachers that are really or that are willing and able to stay in the area and serve our kids is going to be a continuous issue that
Isn't
we
that a
deal with.
challenge that all schools in Arizona are dealing with these
Yeah,
days?
yeah, absolutely. I most of my time here in Arizona was spent in the valley, and there's a greater pool of applicants just
Hmm.
because there's just more people
Right.
in the
Right.
valley, of course. But that's a challenge everywhere. And also, our student count is something that we keep a really close eye on. I feel like we do a wonderful job of being in growing more so in this area of being very student centered and providing a great education for our students. There's always room for improvement, but any trend that I've seen where we are losing students or even remaining stable, I don't believe is an outcome that is based on what is happening internally in our schools. It's more so that the families just really aren't
Hmm.
here in Sedona the way that they used to.
Right.
Now, I also sit on the affordable housing committee, and it's not my area of expertise, but I'm there mostly just to listen and understand and see what's happening in the community. And there are some really bright projects that are out there. So we have some uh, wonderful individuals who understand that that is an issue, and there's some projects that they're putting forth. But it takes time. There's a lot of bureaucracy in that
Yeah.
process, but I'm hopeful that with the establishment of I prefer to use the term accessible housing over
Mm.
affordable, but accessible housing. I'm hopeful that the families will come and stay, and knowing that they have a good public school system to go to
Right.
here in Sedona.
When you were a candidate for the job, being interviewed and down the selection process,
Mhm.
how much upfront research did you do about the school? Did you need to because you had experience at Queen Creek? I mean, what was the process?
Well, so I'm kind of a nerd at heart, and I love research,
Right.
and so I found everything that I could online. I spoke with a lot of people, asked a lot of questions. I didn't go into this blind by any means, and so the challenges that we just spoke of, it was not a surprise
Right.
to me when I was on the job. But it's also, I mean, kind of the way that I think about challenges just in general. I try to when I'm at my best. Is yes, that challenge is there, but those challenges oftentimes are what gets me up in the morning.
Right.
Those are the types of things that excite me about the job as well. Um, we have, and this is not necessarily. I don't want to frame this as a negative because it's not, but the demographics of our area is a beautiful thing. We have a very diverse student body. I think that oftentimes for people who are driving 80 down 89A and
Right.
seeing these
Right.
beautiful homes and visiting and hiking on the trails, make the assumption that it is a community of families of almost universal great wealth,
Right.
and that is just not the case.
It's public school.
It's public, and we do have families that are students that are attending our schools from families that
Right.
are very well off, and we have students that are living in poverty as well, and then everywhere in between, and I think that's a beautiful thing. That was actually something that really, when I did my research, that was a plus to me,
Right.
that
Right.
not a negative. We have a quite a high and growing EL population, which can create some challenges, but it is also a really beautiful thing as well.
Yeah.
So,
That's great.
mhm.
Heather, your experience is a little different in terms of the researching the school because you were already the assistant principal before you got elevated to principal last year. So, same question for you. Going into the year, what did you see as your biggest challenges, and how do you feel like the year went in terms of what your goals were and what you felt like you could accomplish?
Well, going into the challenges that I actually had were not the ones that I anticipated at the beginning.
Isn't that the way it always happens?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
jobs are nowhere near alike. The assistant principal is nothing like the principal.
Mhm.
Can I just step in for a second and say you've done a wonderful job in my opinion, of all the positions in any public school system, the most challenging is a high school principal. And it's a lot to learn. It's a big learning curve, but you've done a wonderful job in your first year.
Well, thank you. I've had a lot of great help and support. So I've had somebody every time I've needed him to tell me exactly what I need to do.
What Tom just said, by the way, is going to be on a podcast forever.
Oh,
So,
great. Well,
Yeah.
well, then I really appreciate that.
All right. When
So-
there's contract negotiation time.
right. Anyway, so good.
So I was really lucky to be in this position and the way I went in because I really felt a lot of support from the teachers, the
Mhm.
parents, the students. They knew me. There was a lot of grace, a lot of assistance, a lot of advice, a lot of help when needed, and I had the benefit of really identifying with the stakeholders things that were important to us, things that we wanted to see in the school, and to kind of formulate the plans on doing that. One of the challenges is that sometimes, like Tom was so smart to do, you come in, of course, there's some changes that need to be made, and you need to to start being productive immediately, but you really also need to observe and test things out and not just jump into things without really realizing what the need is, because then you're reversing course. And so that was a challenge of having to slow down a little bit and really just see the way it truly was so we could assess what the needs were. But still, I feel a lot of support. Um, I think that there's not a person in our school who doesn't doubt that all of us are there for the right reasons and really working towards making this just the best school
Yeah,
in the area.
I hear you. I wanted to throw a quote back at you that
Okay.
I read when that Red Rock News did a story on you when you were officially hired. And the quote is, "We have a changing demographic. Year after year, we have more English language learners. We need to make sure that they're getting the reading and writing support going forward. Our test scores are lower for these groups, so we want to make sure that we're addressing these gaps." So I know it's only a year. What progress do you feel you've been able to make on that front at all this year?
We have we're putting structures in place. So we started this year with an English language a more formal program that the
Mhm.
kids are in, and they are in pull-out class, as well as have push-in services from their instructor that really focus on those literacy skills that are foundational. In high school, it's a little bit different for English learning than it is for the lower levels, lower grades. It's harder to see growth, but when you focus on those literacy foundations, and that's what we've been doing.
Right.
We've also integrated professional development with our staff to incorporate strategies into the classroom that that meet the needs of these students, whether it's vocabulary support, visuals, just still where they're learning at grade level, that they have the language supports to do it. So it's nothing that's ever going to be a quick process,
Mhm.
but the foundation is being built.
Yeah. Playing off of that whole concept of the foreign language students, one of the things I did not know, and I didn't even know it when I was coaching the baseball team at the high school, even though I knew I had a bunch of kids who live in Cottonwood on the team. And when we would come back from road games, we would actually stop at a CVS in Cottonwood and drop off like 4 or 5 of my players.
Mhm.
And I didn't realize until I started doing research for this show that that part of Cottonwood is part of the Sedona Oak Creek School District. Am I right? And that's why, is that the reason why
Well,
there were
no.
kids from Cottonwood going to Red Rock High School?
So Arizona's a school choice state,
Mhm.
and so students can really choose where they want to go if they're out of boundaries. So
And they can even do that during the school year, I
Mhm.
understand, right?
yes, absolutely,
Wow.
and
Yeah.
so that's something that it was very different than when I went to school.
Yeah.
This is where you live, this is where you go to school.
Right.
That's kind of the option. And it can be debated whether this is of benefit or not. I choose to embrace it as an opportunity, um, and understanding that families have choices. And actually, we just spoke about this the other night in our Future Scorpions night. We had several families from around the area that were either currently enrolled in our school system or in local charters in other areas, and just putting it out there and just saying, we understand that you have choice. This is what we have to offer. This is who we are. Being very transparent about our strengths that we have, and understanding that those parents are going to make the best decision that they believe for their child, and I think that's great.
Right.
And that type of responsibility that we have as educators to care for and educate this community's sons and daughters is not a responsibility we take lightly. And that choice is out there. And just understanding that that is just part of the system, and whether they live within Sedona or whatever. When they are in our school system, we embrace them like a community member and a family
Right.
member.
So do you actively like try to recruit Cottonwood kids to build up
I would
the
say
student body, and what are the factors that parents are using to determine sending their kids to Sedona high school rather than staying in Cottonwood?
Yeah, I would say recruit is probably a little bit too strong of a word,
Right.
but we do market.
Right.
Understanding that everybody markets out
Mhm.
there, and I, as an educator, I get that. My wife is a teacher as well, so I should say we get this question often.
Mhm.
We're having a dinner with friends, and they'll ask us, well, what school system is better, or what school is better? And you can never really answer it in that way. I think that each school has, and each district has maybe a little bit unique approach to the way that they educate, and it's up to that family, and to understand what they feel is best for their own
Mhm.
child. It's not better or worse. It's just oftentimes it's just a little bit different. I think that one of the things that we really offer at Sedona, I believe that we are very student centered. We're a smaller school.
Right.
Well, my middle daughter, who is just turned 16, came from we lived in the Valley, and she was at a very large high school, and she was doing fine there. But since she's come to Sedona, um, she's doing not that she was doing poorly down there, but she is excelling academically up here. And I really believe one of the reasons for that is the smaller, close knit environment. The teachers really know the students deeply as human beings, both academically and just who they are as people, and it's much more difficult to slip through the cracks. So I think that is that's a strength that we have in that the community that we are building. That all of the teachers really know all of the students,
Yeah.
and that's of great benefit.
One of the things that people have brought up nationally as being an issue with public schools, maybe the last 10 years or more, is class sizes. Now, Tom's just talking about this relatively small size of the school. How do you feel about the class size at Red Rock High School? Is that something you're always aware of and working on trying to keep?
Well, they're
at a
not very
level?
large. So, and
Right.
some of them are quite small.
What's the average?
25, I believe, is
Yeah.
about the average. And
That's lower than big city public school class
Absolutely.
sizes.
For the most
it's
part, yes.
definitely within the realm of productivity.
Right.
And when you look at, when there's space issues and chaos issues within a class, but really studies show that class sizes are not a major indicator of student success.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
That even, if you have an ineffective teacher or ineffective curriculum, they could be 12 kids and it's not going to
Right,
matter.
right,
So larger
right.
class sizes don't necessarily, when you look at studies, impact the student's education.
Interesting. Yeah.
But we're still pretty low.
Yeah. So I want to take a break to acknowledge my sponsor so we can spend the last half hour getting into more conversation about this. And so I want to tell you about my sponsor who has been with me since the beginning of the show and will be until the end of May, unless I can talk him into extending it. Damien and Danielle Sedona Real Estate Group is nestled in the heart of our breathtaking Sedona. They're a husband and wife team who have not just lived but flourished for more than 20 years in the Verde Valley. As pillars of the village of Oak Creek, they've raised a family, volunteered tirelessly with the Rotary Club of Sedona Village and Sedona Village Partnership, and for a decade have been proud organizers of the beloved annual community barbecue in the village of Oak Creek, which, by the way, I've been asked to MC on May 11th, since I live right next door and I can just roll out of bed and take the microphone.
You're involved in just about everything.
Way too much. Way too much. Damien and Danielle aren't just your next real estate agents. They're your neighbors, your friends, and a top Sedona team ready to support you, whether you're buying or selling. With 2 decades of real estate expertise and a love of our community that's second to none, Damien and Danielle's Sedona Village Real Estate Group is the go-to business for your real estate needs. They want to make your Sedona dream a reality. So contact them today at SedonaRealEstateAgents.com because community and experience matter. So, Tom, I'm going to jump ahead. I mean, we might come back to talking specifically about the high school. And Heather, I want to talk a little bit more about the high school, but I need to get this in. I want to talk about the situation with the Big Park School in the village of Oak Creek, which is close to where I live. When my wife and I moved to the village in July of 2021, I haven't even been here 3 years yet. We drove up the Verde Valley School Road, noticed the school, and thought, oh, this is cool. When you're at school, we see a bunch of kids, during the year, and then found out that it wasn't operating anymore, which was kind of disheartening. I haven't been able to completely wrap my head around what's going on with all the issues involving that space as far as selling it or renting it or whatever. I know you're involved because the school district is very attached to it's the school. What the heck is going on with that?
Well, so it's interesting that you asked the question in that way because when the first part of this radio show, I explained that the first thing that I did when I came in is I listened and I learned and I tried to understand the nuances of many aspects. And I quickly realized that all the happenings with the big park property over the years, there are a lot of moving parts, a lot of moving pieces, and there is a deep, understandably so, a deep emotional attachment to that property from people who live in the community. I live in the community, by the way. We're neighbors. So
Oh, okay.
so I so we
We'll,
finally,
we'll have to grill someday.
hey,
Like,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We'll have a
That'd
get
be great.
together and you can MC, right? Yeah. Um
Will your daughters be okay with that?
yeah, well, I don't know. We'll see. Yeah. So this was before my time, but I know that when the decision was made to close down the school, it was controversial. It was difficult. It was difficult for the families whose students went there, but it was also difficult for the community members around there. We're I think that there were many people in the community, much like yourself, that saw that as a plus in the community.
Right.
The school bell rings and the kids have their backpacks on and they're walking home from school. There's a certain joy and energy that comes from something
But
like that.
but and maybe I don't know if everybody has this perspective, and Heather, you can probably speak to this part of it. And maybe this is because I'm a political person and I think about this stuff. When you see a school like that that's no longer operating because there aren't enough kids,
hmm
then you start going to the place. Well, if this was a public school, why aren't there enough families with kids here?
hmm
Did they have to leave because they were priced out of the area?
Yeah.
I mean, there are so many issues beyond
Yeah.
just the number of kids that are able to populate the school.
Yeah.
And you've seen the whole change too, Heather. So
I have. When I started working here, it was most of my students were part of families that had been here forever. This is where they grew up. Um, and they all knew each other. They were on sports teams together. They'd all gone to school together. And that was the norm. Well, when it was affordable to live here, which was about 40 years ago when people were moving in and started having families and started having kids, those kids are now aging out of our school system
right.
and they haven't been replaced by new
New
families.
families, right?
So, and we still have these wonderful families and they're still very involved and they do the booster club and they do the volunteering. And so they're still here, but their kids are gone. So it's a cost factor.
Right. So Tom, so what's the dynamic now in terms of, I think the thing that I can't wrap my head around is like, who's responsible? What entity is responsible
Yeah.
for seeing what happens to it? I know there've been a lot of meetings with
Sure.
the local politicians. So
So I'll walk you through as many of the facets that I can. So the bottom line is right now, and for years, we've had a school, excuse me, that we allocate resources, both human and financial resources, to a building that doesn't serve students. And that's counterproductive to really what we're trying to do. We have, just like any other school system out there, limited resources. And so every penny, every minute, every hour that is spent working, working allocated toward a school that doesn't have kids is every minute, hour, penny that's taken away from doing the work that we should be doing
right.
is serving our own students. So where we are right now is that, well, prior to that, prior to this move, there was a proposal on the table for the county to purchase the entirety of the property, or lease the entirety of the property. That was, I don't speak for the board, but that was something that the board was quite interested in.
We're talking about the school board?
The school board,
board,
yes,
yeah,
the school board was quite interested in. Myself as a new superintendent, I saw and continue to see that as a positive, but it really just hasn't come to fruition. So one of the options is to place the potential sale of the big park property on the ballot. So anyone that is living within the school district boundaries will be able to have a say of whether the school should have the ability to sell that property when it's on the ballot in November.
And would that be a benefit to the school system? Would the money go to you,
Well,
whoever
yeah,
bought it?
and this is all hypothetical,
Right.
but like hypothetically, if the residents passed that resolution, we would have it doesn't mean that we have to sell it. It
Right.
just means that we have permission to
Right.
sell it. But hypothetically, if we were to move forward to sell that, then yes, that money would go into the school district. Now, one thing that's important to note is that money can only be utilized for capital. It's not for
Mhm.
maintenance and operation. So it would. So although that money would be there, we would be limited to how we could spend that money
Right. Right.
in the district.
What, and this is a question for both of you. What would you not like to see happen with that facility or that land?
Yeah.
Like, like it could become a Walmart
Ye-
if somebody
well,
bought it, right?
So let me say, I am a resident in the
I was going to
village.
say, as being a resident, how do
I'm-
you feel about
I'm raising my family there. I think it's also, well, let me answer this in two ways. One is, as a superintendent, my primary responsibility is to our district and the staff that we serve and the students that we
Right.
serve. That is my primary role. But I also am a resident of this area, and it's very important to me that a decision is made that benefits the entirety of the community as
Mhm.
well.
Mhm.
That the majority of the community is
In favor.
in favor of
of
it
it.
or embraces. So
Yeah.
so what I have continually said is that we are under no obligation to take the highest bid.
Right.
Just like any other real estate deal, there are legal parameters that we have to stay in. Now, with that being said, it has to be a responsible bid. Although it is the property is currently a financial drain, it's also a great asset.
Right.
And if we were to potentially sell that property, that could be of the benefit to our own students that we serve. And so have to really keep that in mind. We can't simply give that property away.
Right.
That
Right.
would be incredibly irresponsible.
What entities make the final decision on what happens to that property?
Well, the first piece would be, it going on the ballot.
Right,
Okay?
right,
And
right.
hypothetically, if it were to pass, then the school board would have the say in if we were to move forward with selling that property and to whom we would sell it to.
And what role does somebody like Donna Michaels or whoever would be in that position going into next year? Because there's an election
Mhm.
for that position, and it slips my mind about exactly what her title is. You probably know, but what's
County
her
supervisor.
town supervisor? So
County.
what's the role of that person in this whole thing?
Yeah, so there are several steps to selling that property, and I'm not a real estate attorney, so
Mhm.
some of these aspects are we would be throughout this process we're under advisement from attorneys, and if we were to move forward, we would of course be under close advisement at that point. But there is a process that we'd also, in addition to the school board, the state facilities board would also have to sign off on something
Right.
like that as well.
Got it. Okay, so this is still going to be a ongoing process for a while, right?
Yeah, I mean, I spend a lot of my time talking about this, listening.
Yeah.
Actually, I was just on a phone call, a pretty lengthy phone call from someone in the community who had an idea for the property. Everything that we talk about right now is hypothetical, but I believe that my role is to listen to any proposal that is out there
Right.
and really listen and research and best understand all the components, the upsides, the downsides, and communicate those to my board.
Right.
Because this is, this is not something that's going to open and close very soon.
Right.
There's
Right.
a lot to
A
this.
lot of moving pieces.
A lot of moving
Yeah,
pieces.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So
It's
Heather,
interesting.
yeah. So Heather, I want to get deeper into your role as principal. How does the curriculum evolve at Red Rock High School, or how much has it evolved in the time you've been there, and how do you want to I don't know if manipulate's the right word, but develop it more? And what are the subjects that kids at this level seem to be having the most difficulty with and need help with these days?
Well, there's a typical curriculum development process, and that every 6 or 7 years that you have a panel and they go through different materials
Hmm.
and sources and test things out and choose them. That happened about 5 or 6 years ago. So we're kind of on the other end of that. But one of the things that I think is mistaken about the curriculum process is that it's just selecting textbooks,
Mm.
which are really just a tool. And textbook companies, of course, provide different layers of resources and online materials and the books. But really, the curriculum is developed by the departments and um, putting together the horizontal and vertical curriculum that when teachers are having discussions about what students need and how they're going to be successful, it's the way that the instructional methods that they use
Mhm.
and the skills that they're developing grade by grade, that they're using that subject matter to teach those skills. So you really need a lot of integration. So it's not as simple as just selecting books. It's really about selecting the processes and the practices and the things that we do year to year and with each other.
Right. Right.
Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's the biggest challenge these days for the kids? Is it math? Is it science? Do they need more work? Do they read enough because they're always on their phones? All that stuff.
They are
Tom was taking
They are
out his
always on
phone.
their phones.
Hey,
Um,
I had baseball players looking at their phone
Yep.
during baseball games. I had to put a stop to. So
right. Yes. It's so easy that we have access to any information possible by
Mhm.
picking up our phones, but
It's not always accurate information.
it's not
but
always accurate information. But the thing that costs us is that we don't necessarily have to work things out ourselves, that we're not necessarily having to do much critical thinking. So that's a skill that I am committed to improving in myself, but also for my students, that we are asking questions and we're analyzing and we're problem solving, because it's not necessarily about a specific subject. I taught history and I taught government and economics, and I really don't care if they learn dates
Right.
or faces or names. I care that they can identify principles and problems and practices and use those principles to solve problems and to understand the way the world works.
Yeah.
That if they know how to figure things out, it doesn't matter what it is, they'll figure it out. And that's what we need to teach them, is these critical thinking skills.
Absolutely.
And that's where Heather and I are completely in line philosophically together. And I think that's one of the reasons why we work together really well in partnership, is that there's a lot of layers to this. But if you backward design any curriculum, I think one of the mistakes that is made is we stop short of what is the purpose to what we are doing. Oftentimes we take an assessment, and there's nothing wrong with this in itself, but we have to, I believe that more broadly, we have to go beyond this. You take this assessment, right? This important assessment that the state utilizes to tell the public how successful we are as an educational institution. So we don't take that lightly, but we backward plan our curriculum from that design.
Mhm.
I think that that's a mistake to stop there. What are we really doing here in education? That takes a question of, what are these students that we serve? What are these little humans, these young men and young ladies? What does it take for them to be successful um, humans in the real world?
Right.
Right. And Heather hit upon this, in that we live in an information age. Information is readily available to us, whether that is accurate information or not, to be determined. But it takes critical thinking, the ability to think critically, to write critically, to read critically. So regardless of the subject matter, whether you're studying American history, or a novel in an English class, to be able to critically process those elements is what is going to help these students later in life in whatever job that they're in. And so those are things that we're really trying to institute in every classroom that we have. It is, yes, we have the standards that we are teaching to in accordance to the subject matter, but more broadly based, we want our students to be critical writers, readers, and thinkers.
As you were talking about that, something occurred to me that I experienced when I was trying to sign up baseball players last year, and have them fill out a questionnaire. And I've actually seen an essay on this on one of the blogs online. What I noticed was, because of the phone, kids no longer have legible handwriting.
Yeah.
And that really, first it was a shock, and then it really bothered me. And I was like, oh my goodness, is there anything we can do, or is that ship sailed?
Yeah. Well, I have to say that I didn't grow up with a phone, and you can barely read my handwriting. So.
Actually, my wife, the woman warrior, has the same issue. I'm always on her about that. What's your feeling about something like that?
It was a shock to me, and it wasn't very long ago, but in my own classroom, I was writing something on the board, and I was writing in cursive, and I had been for years.
And they were like,
and
I didn't know you know Chinese, Principal.
Well, it was probably March, and somebody said, you know that we don't know how to read that.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, what do you mean you don't know how to read that? You've been writing that on the board, and we don't know how to read it.
Right.
So I know that's not the writing necessarily, but there is an element that we think that they're not going to need to know how to communicate in that way, and they are always going to need to know how to communicate in that way. Success in any job, maybe not any, but in most jobs, is going to require writing skills and reading other people's memos and letters, and they're not always going to be electronic.
Right.
So there is, and will always, in my mind, be a place for writing, like literal writing.
Yeah. So this may be a future concern if it's not a concern already. And maybe there are some students who are a little bit more advanced and into the technology. Do you have any worries about the impact of AI, and how students may use that? Could there be like a new problem with plagiarism or having AI do papers for them?
Yeah, so I think the technology's there,
Right.
and we have to, just as in any other organization, learn to work with it. If we try to shut it down and work against it and pretend that it's not there, that will be of detriment to not only our students, but also our teachers. We'd be setting them up for some very challenging circumstances.
Right.
So,
I mean, there could be some potential benefits once
lots of benefits.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so, there's a lot to learn. I'll tell you, that's, as the superintendent, I'm doing what I can to research and go to seminars and get professional development for myself so I can help guide our district in how we approach things. But the learning curve is pretty steep. That technology is moving very, very fast.
Oh, incredible.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't really wrapped my head around it at all. And I'm a writer, and it actually kind of scared. I lost a client as a freelance editor, because they decided they could write their blog posts using AI instead of having me write it for them.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean,
oh gosh.
And so this
makes me so sad.
Oh my goodness.
So I know, Heather, you're the same way. I take great pride in my writing. So something about that, like personally, it hurts me.
I just don't. I think that your person will be back, because I think there's a distinct difference that you can feel when you're reading it.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell when I'm reading
that it's artificial.
It is not authentic.
Right.
It does not feel like there's that human connection,
There's not a
and
personality
that's
in the
exactly
writing.
right.
Yeah.
So it may be easier, but I don't think
Yeah.
it's not what we're looking for.
Right. Right.
And I think it's a good tool for sure, but it needs to be a tool and not the final product.
It's probably at this stage of the game, maybe it's a little bit too soon for high schoolers to be diving into that. Maybe more of a college student level
Oh,
thing that's taken off.
I
Or do
don't
you
think
know
so.
people who are
Yeah,
doing it?
100%. And I've taught it. So when it
Oh, wow.
came out, I was teaching an AP class when this really kind of hit. It was, I think, October or November of 2022. And we tested it. And we were because there's a strong writing component to AP US history. So let's see what it can do. And we tested it in a million different ways and asked it to, you know, find resources and asked it to write this. And those students at that level, and these are 10th and 11th graders, at that level could recognize that at most it was a good introductory paragraph.
Mhm.
That there wasn't
Right.
somebody, it wasn't somebody interacting with the material or critically thinking or writing, and there wasn't thought into it. So, they've tried. I mean, they try to a couple of them have turned in papers that are AI, but it's very obvious,
Right.
very early when they do that, and they themselves see it's not written to the level that they are being taught
Right.
to write.
Yeah. And isn't a lot of it have to do with how much you input into it, determine what it spits out? I mean, the AI program, if you're doing a term paper on American history, you have to ask it really specific questions and input data for it to give you something substantial.
You
don't
do, and you have to ask it to incorporate certain. I mean, in order for it to write something substantial, then you have to actually give it the resources
Right.
or put it towards those resources, and even then, it may not be correct.
Right. Right.
So, I mean, again, a tool because you still have to do a lot of the thinking and inputting,
Hmm.
but there's no paper I've ever seen written on its own by asking a few questions
Got it.
that fools anybody into thinking that this is a critically written document.
Right. So we have about, I guess, 3 to 5 minutes left before I have to close. So I guess how I want to wrap up is ask both of you, now that we're getting close to the end of the first year. I'm sure you're already thinking about next year because the work never ends, right? So what are you thinking about you'd like to accomplish next year? What are the goals? Any improvements? Just whatever it is you've been thinking about. It may be premature at this point, but
No,
Heather,
absolutely.
Heather, I'll start with you.
So it's something that has been envisioned for years and years, and that is just this pure collaborative environment where teachers are working cross-culturally,
Curriculum.
curricular.
Cross-curricularly.
Like that didn't sound
Culturally
right.
well.
Culturally, and really embedding skills across grade levels.
Mhm.
That it's a team effort, measured by the team. That it's very interactive, and teachers who are high skill and high interest and high involvement are the ones doing this. And I have to tell you, it's looking really good.
Great.
It's looking
great.
really good. That is where our teachers' interest is. We've been doing PLCs. We started the process
What
about
is
2 years
PLC?
ago.
Professional
A
learning
professional learning community. There
Got
are
it.
these little groups of teachers that work together and analyze data and plan lessons, and it's really becoming part of the culture.
That's great.
Yeah.
Tom, what's
Yeah,
on
so
your agenda?
well, maybe a little bit more broadly based. I guess that's probably my role to look at things a little bit more broadly.
Bigger picture?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I look at the instructional side. I just continue to work on being as student centered as possible. We love our teachers, but I think that there is a need to move from being more teacher centered to being a little bit more student centered. Start with the student learning as opposed to starting with the instruction. They're both tied together very,
Right.
very closely, of course. One of the aspects that I'm really excited about is this is the first time, at least in many, many years, that we have really well planned, structured short-term, long-term plans for our professional development. We have next year our calendar is changing to have in our middle school and our high school, we have a late start for our students every Wednesday. Our teachers will all be there for professional development, and then the PLCs that we're talking about. But that gives teachers the time to really devote to that professional development. I think that oftentimes we have as administrators these concepts and these ideas in mind, but then we don't provide the time as a very valuable resource to our teachers to implement those practices. So that's at the high school, and at the elementary we have early release. So that's kind of on the instructional side. On the cultural side, what we are really hoping to continue to build a sense of community and pride in our school. We want to increase the participation of our athletics and our performing arts, but also, if you're not participating, to be a member of this community and the student body to get to those games and to be a part of those things, and have a culture of celebration and joy of not only what's happening in the classroom, but what's outside of the classroom. Because I believe, what happens on, say, the softball field, that's a classroom as well.
Right.
There's a lot to learn from all of those extracurricular activities as well.
That's great. And by the way, I have to say, you were really going to an excellent school when the principal is at the baseball field grilling hot dogs.
Yeah.
But I was so involved in my game, I never got one that day that she was out there. So I'm still next year.
We'll do it again.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. We plan on doing a lot more of that next year.
That's all the time we have for our show today. I want to thank my great guest, Tom Swaniger, the superintendent of the Sedona Oak Creek Unified School District, and Heather Isom, principal of Sedona Red Rock Junior and Senior High School. Thanks, both of you, so much for doing this. Special thanks to my sponsor, Damien and Danielle, Sedona Real Estate Group at Caldwell Banker Realty. You want to seek them out for your real estate needs because their devotion to the community and their experience matter. By the way, mark your calendars because Damien and Danielle will be my in-studio guests on Saturday, May 11th, when they'll be talking about their real estate business and their sponsorship of the upcoming Village of Oak Creek barbecue at Voca Park near the Oak Creek Golf Course. Thanks as always to my main man and producer, Ryan Thompson, manning the booth today. By the way, tell your friends who couldn't hear the show that they can listen to a podcast version anytime on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And you can email me with comments and questions to Stephen@mellowmountainradio.com. And I also have a Sedona Life with Stephen Hanks Facebook page. Please tune in next Saturday morning when we will focus on local singer-songwriters with my special in-studio guest, Vicky Oldham, the composer of the song you're hearing right now, and award-winning songwriter, performer, and vocal coach, Chandra Jefferson. They may even be performing for us live in the studio. Thanks for listening, everyone.